Welcome to Wednesday Inspirational Book Lounge. I'm Anna Murby, your host. This season, we're reading Mephibosheth, A Twisted Life of Unexpected Grace and Mercy, the true story of a medically fragile child whose life became a living testimony of God's grace. This book invites us into a story of deep love and brokenness, revealing how God's mercy often shines brightest in the most fragile lives. Enjoy the episode.
Mephibosheth, A Twisted Life of Unexpected Grace and Mercy, by Chaplain Aaron. Read by Hubert Carl. Chapter 12. One Referral After Another. Put you my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Psalms 56:8. Repetitive, redundant referral. There must surely be few things in modern life more frustrating than endless cycle of medical referrals. For Paul and Dale, this became a part of everyday living. Their young family of nurturing believers seemed to spend half of life driving from one medical office to another, carrying stacks of paperwork thick enough to resemble legal files instead of medical charts. Every specialist had another opinion, another concern, another form to complete, and nearly always another referral waiting at the end of the appointment. This was not a simple matter of routine checkups. Mephibosheth carried an obvious and frightening condition that every physician immediately recognized. Beneath the upper back portion of his skull rested a tumor that created constant pressure against the growing brain of a 1.5-year-old child. The discomfort was not occasional fussiness or mild soreness. It was relentless pain. His misshapen head and unusual facial structure drew attention everywhere they went. Between the swelling of the skull, the cleft palate, and the awkward development of his little body, he was heartbreaking to behold at first glance. Yet behind those difficulties were bright blue eyes and a gentle warmth that reached towards people with surprising trust. Everyone already understood the obvious question: how do we remove the tumor? The greater challenge was discovering how to move beyond the endless process of evaluations and next steps in order to finally arrive at treatment. A referral, after all, was simply a doctor admitting that he or she did not possess the exact expertise needed for the problem, and therefore sending the family onward to another physician who might understand it a little better. The next doctor would often repeat the examination, add additional notes, and then pass them onward once again. Yes, this was accepted protocol. Yes, this was common procedure. But to the family of a suffering child, it often felt agonizingly slow. Paul and Dale did not view Mephibosheth as merely a difficult case. This was their little boy. Every additional week meant more crying, more sleepless nights, more seizures, more pain for the child who could not explain what he was feeling. To the specialists, the process was methodical and careful. To the family, it sometimes felt like watching a house burn while everyone held a committee meeting about the proper kind of fire extinguisher. If it were compared to a restaurant, it would almost sound humorous. Imagine ordering a hamburger with cheese and tomato, only to have the first restaurant explain that they handled hamburgers, but not cheese. You would then be referred to somewhere else for the cheese, only discover that the next establishment specialized in cheese, but they would need to refer you for the tomatoes. Eventually, a customer begins to wonder if anyone intended to finish the hamburger at all. That was the emotional exhaustion of referrals. Yet beneath all the paperwork and repetitive appointments was a sincere effort to arrive at the safest, most accurate diagnosis possible. Neural surgery on a frail toddler was not something approached casually. Each physician was attempting to gather enough information to build a complete picture before someone finally attempted the surgery on the child's skull. So Paul and Dale endured the process. There were pediatricians, neurologists, developmental specialists, radiologists, scheduling offices, insurance authorizations, and follow-up consultants. The waiting room became part of life. Paul would quietly read his Bible, while Dale held Mephibosheth close in her arms. Nurses often smiled at the unusual little boy with the impossible Bible name, while other parents glanced over with uncertain curiosity. The greatest challenge was not merely the inconvenience, it was maintaining hope while progress moved at the speed of paperwork. Still, little by little, the path forward began to unfold. The doctors needed clear imaging of the tumor and the surrounding structures of the brain. Ordinary examinations could reveal only so much. If surgery were ever going to be attempted, they would need something far more detailed and precise. At long last, the specialists began forming a true game plan. The next great step in the journey would be an MRI. That terrifying MRI machine. To understand the purpose of an MRI is to appreciate one of the strangest marvels of modern science. Nearly everyone understands what a simple metal detector can do. It can sweep across the ground and uncover a hidden coin beneath the dirt and gravel. Now imagine something vastly greater, a magnetic field the size of a small room, curved into a massive circular tunnel and empowered with enough force to look deep inside the human body. What an astonishing invention! This machine could peer beneath the skin and bone, mapping the hidden structures of the brain with a remarkable precision. It was an extraordinary blessing for medicine, unless you happened to be the person lying inside of it. The MRI suite felt cold and intimidating from the moment one enters the room. Strict instructions are given before the process began. No metal of any kind was allowed anywhere near the machine. The magnet was so powerful that a metal chair across the room could be pulled violently towards the opening if someone made a careless mistake. Cell phones, watches, keys, even small objects became dangerous projectiles in an instant. The staff moved carefully and deliberately, accustomed to the unusual power housed inside the giant humming cylinder. Yet for all its scientific wonder, the machine carried another reputation known to nearly everyone who had experienced it: the noise. An MRI did not simply hum quietly in the background. It groaned, pounded, rattled, knocked, and clanged with mechanical violence as the electromagnetic pulses created detailed images layer by layer. Adults often described it afterwards as one of the most unnerving experiences of their life. Now imagine being a 1.5-year-old child, already suffering from constant pressure and pain inside the skull. Mephibosheth could not understand what was happening. To complete the scans, the technicians carefully positioned his tiny body on a narrow plastic table and secured a molded shell around his head to prevent movement during the imaging. Even before the machine started, the restraint itself was frightening. His little face peered through the small openings of the plastic frame, while Dale stood nearby trying to soothe him with gentle words and touch. She too was given oversized protective earmuffs against the coming noise, though no amount of panic could truly soften the experience for the child. Then the machine awakened. First came low mechanical whir, followed by sharp bursts of knocking and pounding that echoed through the chamber like someone striking steel pipes with a hammer. Every instinct in a small child's body cries out in fear. His heart races as though danger itself surrounded him. The mind can scarcely imagine such terror for a little boy whose understanding of life had barely begun. The scan itself lasted only a short while, though to a frightened child it must have been endless. At last the pounding ceased. The shell was loosened and gently lifted away from Mephibosheth's head. Exhausted from fear, noise, and confusion, the little boy collapsed to Dale's shoulder and drifted into sleep almost immediately. There in the quiet afterward, while sitting once again in another waiting room filled with forms, whispers, and fluorescent lights, his weary mother waited for the next instructions and the next step in the journey that never seemed to stop moving forward. Pharmacy referral. Another necessary, though often tedious, part of the medical journey was referral to the pharmacist. Once the attending physician had reviewed the MRI scans, examined the symptoms, and considered the possible causes of Mephibosheth's constant pain, the next step was to determine what medication might help ease the severe headaches caused by the pressure on his growing brain. That decision eventually led to the pharmacy counter in Sutter Memorial Hospital, another stop in the endless procession of paperwork, waiting rooms, and specialists that now filled daily life. The process itself had become familiar. One walked to the counter, handed over the paperwork, and waited for the obvious question. "And what is the patient's name?" the technician asked politely. "Mephibosheth," Dale answered with a tired smile. "I'm sorry. Could you spell that for me?" Mephibosheth. The young woman behind the counter blinked once, then smiled awkwardly. "Could you repeat that one more time?" By now, Dale was accustomed to the routine. The pharmacist scribbled the letters carefully on the form, nodding thoughtfully, and finally said, "Interesting name. We'll call you when the medication is ready." Waiting became part of life. Some people became irritated by the delays, but Dale rarely viewed time that way. Her life was too full of responsibilities to sit idle for long. While waiting for prescription, she often organized paperwork for the children, returned phone calls, updated journals about medication and appointments, or quietly planned the next steps of care. The days moved quickly because every hour was already occupied with purpose. In many ways, her life was not burdened with busyness so much as blessed with meaningful tasks. At last, the pharmacist called out, "Medication for Dale." That solution seemed much easier for everyone involved. If the name could not be pronounced, simply call for the mother instead. As Dale approached the counter, the young pharmacist hesitated for a moment and then asked the question nearly everyone asks. "I hope you don't mind me asking," she said softly, "what kind of name is Mephibosheth?" Despite her exhaustion, Dale immediately brightened. The question itself always opened the door. With warm eyes and gentle smile, she explained the short story from the Bible about King David and his beloved friend Jonathan. She described the promise David made to care for Jonathan's family and how one wounded little boy was eventually welcomed into the king's home and treated as a son. Then she explained the greater meaning behind the name. "You see," she said kindly, "that's also what Jesus offers us. God loves us enough to forgive and adopt us into his family. Mephibosheth reminds us no one is too broken or too forgotten for the kindness of God." For some reason, no matter how weary she became, Dale never seemed to tire of explaining the goodness of the Lord. Whenever someone sincerely asked, it was as though their heart had become soft soil waiting for water. The pharmacist behind the counter listened quietly, not entirely sure what to say. She smiled and shook her head gently. "Well," she said, "I never knew that before. That's really beautiful. Thank you." And with medication in hand and another conversation planted quietly with the gospel, Dale gathered her things and prepared for the next referral waiting just around the corner. Worth the exhaustion, Dale finally made her way out to the large green car and gratefully settled into the worn upholstery for a quiet moment of relief. The long day had taken its toll. Both she and Mephibosheth had just endured one of the most frightening medical experiences imaginable, especially for a 1.5-year-old child. The MRI machine, with its pounding noise and confining restraints, was now behind him. He had made it through. For the moment, that alone was enough. The official answers would not arrive until later, after doctors reviewed the scans and assembled yet another plan of action. But something encouraging had already happened during the exhausting day. Everywhere they went, people paused. Some merely glanced over and quietly recognized this fragile child was not simply another chart or diagnosis, but a person. Others wanted to know more. Nurses, technicians, pharmacists, and strangers in waiting rooms all seemed drawn toward this unusual little boy with the impossible Bible name. And when they asked about that name, they inevitably heard about mercy, adoption, and the gentleness and the kindness of God. In the back seat, Mephibosheth slept quietly, strapped safely into place and completely worn out from the ordeal. Dale glanced at him through the rearview mirror as she drove north towards Citrus Heights. A deep sigh escaped her chest, not merely from fatigue, but from the realization that none of this effort had been wasted. Every appointment, every waiting room, every explanation, every prayer, and every difficult mile carried an eternal purpose hidden somewhere within it. This little boy had already touched more lives than anyone could possibly count, and his story was only beginning. As the evening shadows stretched across the road, another hopeful thought crossed Dale's mind. What if the doctors could actually remove the tumor? What if the constant pressure and pain could somehow be relieved? Would Mephibosheth begin to grow like other children? Could he someday run, laugh, and play without suffering? The possibility itself was enough to bring a weary smile across her face. She gently pressed the accelerator and headed towards the crowded 7-bedroom house, overflowing with life, ministry, noise, and love. Everyone there would be waiting anxiously for the news. Everyone would be thankful for one simple blessing. Mephibosheth had made it through the day.
Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to come back next week for another installment of Mephibosheth, A Twisted Life of Unexpected Grace and Mercy.